Good morning, everyone. My name is Andreea Dumitrașcu, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the 6th edition of the Connect University Summer School. For those of you who are attending the Connect University for the first time, Connect University is the knowledge-sharing flagship initiative of DG Connect, aiming to promote digital policies to the society at large. This special 6th edition focuses on digital for our planet and is presenting the way digital technologies can be harnessed to tackle climate change. Don't forget that all the sessions are recorded and can be reviewed afterwards on the YouTube channel of the Digital EU, as well as on the Connect University webpage. You can still register for the next sessions. And don't forget that if you join at least 7 events, you will get the Connect University diploma. For today's session on quantifying the contribution of 5G to sustainability, we invite you to join us on Slido using the code 5G Sustainability. I repeat, the code for Slido is 5G Sustainability. You can ask us questions and we will allocate them accordingly to our distinguished speakers of today. Also, let me remind you that you can use the hashtag ConnectUniversity when sharing insights on the event on social media. Without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Peter Stuckmann, Head of Unit Future Connectivity Systems, DG Connect from the European Commission.
Many thanks, Andrea. Really an honor for me to introduce this session, very interesting session on what 5G can do for sustainability. We have 3 very distinguished speakers, so if you want also to make the audience more interested, you can switch on your cameras so that this becomes more lively. So we have Rosella Cardone from Ericsson. I will introduce a bit more in detail before the speeches. We have Azedine Gatti from Orange Labs, and we have Marit Palovieta from Etno. So I will just give some short words of introduction to frame a bit. 5G for sustainability and especially quantifying is of course a challenge. We can see also from the presentations. I'm curious if we get some interesting insights there. We all know, well, most of us are using 4G, and we know that is very important entry ticket for all citizens, consumers, businesses to the digital economy, digital society. But 5G is more than smartphones. First, of course, traffic is growing, new applications are coming, so we need more capacity, and we need also more efficient technology. So this is something, of course, as a continuity of what we know from 4G, that is, of course, their needs, what we need to do. But there's more than that. We also have new capabilities in 5G for industrial applications, like in automotive, health, manufacturing, agri-food, you name it. So this is what we call the digital and green transition. And in terms of, we can see then, from the perspective of opportunities and needs, because on the one hand, we have a lot of contributions. We can make things more efficient with this technology in all kinds of sectors, but we also have to address challenges in terms of growth of data traffic and how to do that most efficient way to also limit the energy consumption. And on the first point, so what are the opportunities? What we call the plus. There, then some studies say that we can have 20 to 25% by 5G enabled digital technologies of less energy consumption in some key sectors. Think about, for example, automotive sector, more efficient traffic, avoiding traffic jams in cities, on highways, also enabling the transition to electrification, automation. So there are huge efficiency gains in the energy sector. We can make similar calculations. So there's a huge potential. And this is especially important now in the context of the recovery from the pandemic. You have maybe seen that we have proposed and now implementing with the member states the Next Generation EU, the recovery plans, the national recovery plans. And in this context, indeed, we insisted, and I think all leaders in Europe agreed, that we need a forward-looking investment agenda, that we need to invest, for example, 20% minimum in digital, 37% minimum in green. And yeah, this, of course, is very much in line with this session today, where we can think about what are the opportunities, what can we enable for sustainable growth and recovery. So what we need to do now is invest in connectivity to get the forward-looking recovery, enabling a sustainable long-term growth. So this is this positive agenda of 5G in terms of opportunities, enabling climate action, enabling energy efficiency in key sectors. Of course, the digital sector itself also has to do its homework. Yeah? So if we do nothing on energy consumption of the network itself, the energy consumption will explode. Yeah? Think about data centers, massive mobile network deployment. And today, yeah, we have discussions. We sometimes even feel bad about it if we send an email saying thank you, or watching an episode on Netflix, because we know this is contributing to the carbon footprint. And this is due to that these technologies are still at early stage. Yeah? So the app economy, we know it now for 10, 15 years. And this is, of course, has to be very much worked on and made more adapted. So this I would then say in the context of needs. So first the opportunities, the plus, and then this minus. That means what this sector consumes. We have to, of course, decrease this minus, this negative contribution to the carbon footprint. But overall, we're convinced that that below the bottom line there is a plus, which doesn't mean that we have to be complacent on the sector itself. So this is, of course, in the interest of the operators, for example, as they have to pay the energy bill. So it's huge for the operators, in the order of billions of euros per year. But then, of course, there can be efforts to be done to reduce this. But we also need to look a bit more mid to long term and think about what to make it a design criterion, and that we're doing, for example, for the next generation of technologies for 6G. Where we really have to introduce key performance indicators and really make this part of the design. Yeah, so the bottom line is the balance is positive. There is a plus under the bottom line. Efficiency gains are huge, but the sector has to make its homework itself, and we are happy to help in making this plus big and the minus smaller. And we will see in the presentations today that these opportunities and needs are indeed addressed by the speakers. I'm very much looking forward to that. And in that spirit, I would then go to the first speaker, Rosella Cardone. She is head of sustainability and corporate responsibility in market area Europe and Latin America in Ericsson. She will talk about 5G enabling climate actions in industries. So really, on the plus side, so what 5G can do to improve, to make our sectors green. And Rosella is the head of sustainability and corporate responsibility in Ericsson. Her role is in advocating the role that ICT can play in addressing challenges in areas such as energy, climate, and education. She's also focused on innovation, sustainability projects in public-private partnership with clients, leading industrial players, institutions, and academia and demonstrate the value of 5G networks, AI, and IoT as enablers of an intelligent, sustainable, and fully connected world. Rosella holds a master's degree in mathematics and a postgraduate education in probability and statistics. She has been working in the ICT industry for plus 20 years, covering several responsibilities in R&D, customer operations management, strategy, innovation, and partnerships, marketing, and sustainability. Really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. And hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to be part of this very important event today. And let me thank the organizer of this event to have me today. So I'm going to share my presentation. Okay. So today I will talk about the enabling effect of 5G into industries. Before that, let me bring in short overview about who is Ericsson and our responsibility and commitment into the ICT sector as well. Ericsson exists for plus 140 years, and we are present more or less across all over the world with the presence of close to 100,000 people with a high focus and investment in research. And what we do, we design, produce, and build 5G networks today, which are already live across all 5 continents in the world. And as we are very close to our client to build a 5G network, we feel, we know that it's very important to address climate action to our ICT sector. Into that, we address environmental sustainability across all our value chain. So we are CO2 emission committed to be carbon neutral by 2030 in our own operation. We have targeted involvement of our suppliers toward this direction, as well as part of our 5G portfolio. Our target is that 5G will be 10 times more energy efficient than 4G by next year, 2022. And a very short input around the 5G networks. Into this slide, you see an holistic view, however, representing well the real trend that as Ericsson we could observe all over the world during the past year. So we're moving from 1X generation to the next one, to G3G, 4G, and the energy consumption always increased. Now, if we want to avoid that with 5G, this will not happen. And we know that, as Peter was mentioning, the energy cost annually is huge. At Ericsson, we have is estimated to be $25 billion per year for the telecom operators. As also we know that the data traffic in the networks will continue to grow. It's very important to take care about breaking the energy curve. And that's the name of the approach that we took. We help our clients, operators, to break that energy curve when evolving toward 5G, keeping flat or even lower the energy consumption. And here just I put one example developed together with the telephonic operator, showing in concrete already. These are actual data figures that 5G massive MIMO at Bitman consume already 10% of the equivalent 4G. And using on the current 4G network of Telefonica some software features, intelligent capabilities, like sleeping mode, for example, based on traffic condition, we could save 23% of energy. So this is very important. But now, looking at the role of connectivity, role of 5G into the transition, environmental transition toward low carbon future. So first of all, at Ericsson, we have a strong research capabilities. We are studying the CO2 emission in our industry for many years already. And we know that the carbon footprint of ICT sector counts for 1.4% of the overall greenhouse gas emission. Of course, we need to take care about it. We have the responsibility to bring it lower, much more. However, compared to the global emission, is pretty small. On the other side, we have analyzed that the potential of the ICT sector, if applied to other industries, and you see into the curve on the right, industries like energy, manufacturing, buildings, transport, food, and so on. So the ICT sector can address that total greenhouse gas emission by at least 15%. So the potential is to lower CO2 emission by at least 15% by 2030. And this CO2 emission, 15%, can be even accelerated if the latest technological capabilities are applied, like 5G, like artificial intelligence, like mobile edge computing, and so on. But let me be a little bit more concrete. Before Peter mentioned already about the value of 5G in the sector of automotive and transportation. Here I will share a bit around manufacturing sector and port. I will be let me say very short. However, all the information are available into the Ericsson.com if you want to know more. Let me start with manufacturing. And of course, we start from the sector itself. The manufacturing, into this graph, you see the breakdown per the value added, GDP at global level, divided by different kind of manufacturing industries. And you see there is a big potential to become smarter with ICT technologies and application. The graph, the small cake clarify the level of use of application today. And we have analyzed, as part of the Exponential Roadmap initiative, we have analyzed that for this specific sector, manufacturing today counts for 32% of the global emission. And the potential of ICT application into this to lower CO2 emission is at least 20%. This can be achieved, for example, if we apply solutions like real-time monitoring and control. Why? This is very important. Let me be very concrete. Looking at some use cases. These are, let me say, key use cases to make a factory smarter. Today, manufacturers want to customize their products more, and this requires a factory to be more flexible. They want to secure security and integrity of data, as well as more safety for their workers. So they want to minimize risks into the factory. On the other side, of course, they want to leverage on all the data that today in the factory are collected in silos. They want to break the silos and, let me say, collect data, process data, extract intelligent insights, and turn in real time, I would say near real time, relevant action, even for controlling the factory. And of course, saving improvements into maintenance and operation, and this can bring even circular economy approach and less CO2 emission. So into these five use cases, you can recognize some, let me say, actions, smart action that can enable all those challenges I said before. Through digital twin, for example, factories can develop a virtual, a digital overview in real time of what's happening into the factory, collect data, process, extract insights, and for example, alert, identify early defects across the line of production, and then increase and bring into the factory continuous improvements. And this will save scrap, that's less use of resources. This can increase yield into the factory, that means better quality of products, but this also means, let me say, less scrap as well. This can save energy along all the production line, and this is very important. And the use of collaborative robots and remote actions as well, this also make optimize the use of all steps into the production. At the end of the day, less energy consumption. This is one example, of course. Ericsson is also a manufacturer, and we applied into our 5G smart factory in US this kind of concept. And these numbers are actual data, saving 24 energy, so we are more energy efficient for 24%. Of course, 100% use of renewables, as well as we are reusing rainwater with the special systems. So all these, of course, is saving resources, is saving energy, and less CO2 emission overall. Moving to the port area, so in particular the port logistics. Starting from the value of this sector, 90%, that's very important, 90% of the world trade go through ports across the globe. The container part is growing terribly, and however, also here into this sector, there is a high potential to be smarter. And looking at the challenges that with 5G and the digital technologies we can address, you see they need necessary skills for automation, they need to improve congestion slowdown, they need to improve infrastructure monitoring through digital, they want to reduce risks for workers, as well as improve operation. When I say yard operation improvements, this behind as a strong environmental pollution need for improvement into the port logistics. From, let me say, 5G network perspective, we analyzed, we got in touch with some ports drivers, both public entities as well as private companies, and we could match, we could see how 5G capabilities like in terms of latency, in terms of flexibility, a flexible network capable to, let me say, get million of devices through IoT kind of application, and then of course reliability and interoperability, all these kind of capabilities can enable sustainability for the ports, and for sure in terms of economic benefits, that in very short means productivity, efficiency, and competitiveness. Environmental benefits, since let me say optimized logistics, improve environmental, less pollution, and of course social benefits, among the others, high safety for workers into this area. These are examples of use cases that we have already applied, trialed, let me say, deployed. So connecting the infrastructure of the port where the logistics happen, connecting the vehicles involved into the operation like AGV, trucks, forklift, and then of course building a digital twin map of what's happening in real time into the port, and using remote operation. This is the maximum level of automation that can happen, of course. So having full automation and managing and controlling remotely, all these, of course, can make a port smarter from economic, environmental, safety perspective. And in very concrete, we work among other experience in Italy with the Port of Livorno and academia, and of course with the telecom operator team. And we could even, in an actual way, with the data points, quantify the benefits of these digital capabilities put in place with 5G and on top application. And you see the numbers on the bottom. Addressing the KPI of the port, that's very important. So they can optimize vessel berthing time by 20%, and this is of course money. We could optimize through the use of augmented reality, of course 5G and the digital twin enabled actions. We could optimize productivity up to 25%, and this could also enable better movements, more intelligent movements into the area of the port of all devices like trucks and so on, saving fuel, fossil fuel, and this is leading to CO2 emission less per each gateway, per each container operation terminal into the port. We have estimated a less CO2 emission by 8.2%. So for all these examples, starting from the Ericsson into the network, and into the manufacturing port and so on, you can find all the information on our Ericsson.com. And last, so let me go into the conclusion. Again, digital sector can address at least 50% of the total greenhouse gas emission into the other industries by 2030. This is so relevant. So it's very important that 5G networks are accelerated to, let me say, to go into the countries to accelerate climate action. And based on our experience, that's very important that public sector and private sector all work together to accelerate the use of 5G and digital technologies into other industries, since this really drives transition toward the low carbon industries. Thank you. With this, I hand over to you, Peter.
Many thanks, Rosella. Very, very interesting. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So the first one, I've seen you included some links where you can get some further information. But now, maybe during the next speech, if you have time, there were some studies that you mentioned. So if you have, I think, other Little, but also others, if you have also maybe on the overall figures that you introduced in the first 3-4 slides, that would be, I think, interesting. You can post them maybe in the chat if you have them available, if they're not included in the slides, if that is possible now. Otherwise, we find other ways.
Yes, I will do now. Absolutely,
yeah.
yes.
Very good.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, and then one question from the audience. In transition to 5G, and especially on the equipment and devices. So we know we have 4G today. Of course, what you introduced in terms of ports, verticals, I mean, this will be dedicated devices, so new types of devices. But then, indeed, one worry is also when we talk to citizens and stakeholders, that they say, okay, for every generation, you need a new smartphone. Of course, we also need new smartphones. In 4G, we had several generations, and people sometimes buy a smartphone because of a new camera, not necessarily only because there's a new radio interface in it. But there sometimes worries that on new generation of equipment. How do you see that? Can we find a system where we can replace them or upgrade them? How would you see that?
Yes, of course. I'm not expert into this specific area of devices, smartphone. However, of course, 5G devices requires to be connected to 5G networks, and if those are connected to the network that's not 5G, that will be switched to 4G. So, and this is seamless and this works. Yeah, so that's my...
Yeah, that's already for the service continuity. And then, of course, if you need new devices, that's, of course, we also can think about things like circular economy. That's something that in general, we really, it's part of the Green Deal, where we have to find systems that we have recycling, that you can reuse material, the very, very valuable material in the smartphones. Of course, then there is the cost to producing them. This is of course something also to be looked into to be made more efficient. But on the other hand, I mean, thinking about upgrade is also important when you, for example, think about cars. Now today we have sometimes the problem that we have a legacy technology in a car, and then there comes a new technology with a new radio interface, and then you have to add it on top. So we need in the future also to think about this upgrade idea. I think it's a very good point that is made here to make things forward compatible, to be able to adapt things by software. I think these are also very interesting thoughts. But indeed, I mean, the smartphone and the production at the end of the day, when we talk about plus and minus, has also to be factored into the equation, that we say there are some costs if we make new things. But that's also very interesting, Rosella, when you talk about this digital twin of the port. I mean, of course, it will cost something to do this digital twin, but the efficiency that you can gain by applying it of course, an order of magnitude higher. So it's worth doing it. That's always the part. Yeah. You want to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to confirm that, of course, the introduction of new technologies, introduction of innovation requires investment. However, if you find a sustainable business case where, of course, there is some efficiency, there is some growth opportunity into the business case, we shall always include the sustainability perspective of the business case. So that's a very important view. As now ports, for example, they see as value less CO2 emission. This is an important piece, let me say, of the business case as well. So absolutely, and that's the trend that now ports and also manufacturers are looking at.
Thank you. Then maybe one last question from the audience. Well, we have two more. One is, okay, rollout of 6G. I think we now starting the research on 6G. So my answer would be that we see first 6G systems rolled out by the end of this decade. Any thoughts on that, Rosella?
Yeah, we are running an important pan-European project, 6G era. Ericsson is fully involved. So as I said, Peter, this is research. However, is important collaborative initiative with the relevant European players. And that's we look at the next 5 years, end of this decade. Yeah.
Indeed. And then which are the challenges? I mean, of course, when you have a new generation, it's the opportunity to also step a bit back and think about what do we have to change? Is there any general new design ideas? And this, I think this HexaX project that you mentioned is really doing what could be the use cases. Of course, we don't know the use cases today, but to see what are the enabling technologies, the key technologies that can meet these new requirements that we see on the horizon. Things like the twins that you mentioned. I mean, if you go higher in frequencies, you can really feel the materials. You can really even make a step change forward in these twins, the twin of the planet, in principle, wherever it's useful. We can think about this manufacturing, for example, really seamless co-working between robots and humans. So these are challenges that we want to address in 6G, but then also, of course, the energy challenge, which we now, as I said, I mean, today things are not the most efficient how they work. Thinking about sending emails, thinking about streaming. And here, of course, we have a huge potential to also save energy in the future and to design the system built in that we have an efficient performance in that respect. Okay, we take one more and maybe the rest we keep for the later discussion. Would it be actually possible to build 5G without increasing energy consumption? I think in the first slide you gave an idea. That's what could be possible, but
it's possible. That's the experience also that we are touching together with our clients, and that's why Ericsson developed this breaking the energy curve approach. It's a holistic approach, picking different pieces of the network based on the operator network situation today. Let me spend a few words around that. So first of all, modernize their current network footprint. That's very important. Look at if it's possible to sunset, so to say, 2G or 3G, and stay with what is really relevant for the next opportunity for operators, and then modernize to the latest technology, which are much more energy efficient. The second is to use intelligent software feature that can switch off or improve energy consumption into radio devices, depending on the situation into the network. So we could see it's possible to save energy up to 15%. Then the third pillar is to look at intelligent, smart radio planning in rural areas, dense urban areas, and dense urban. So this can save, let me say, investment for operators, as well as to put devices, radio devices, based on the real need. And this will also lead energy, better energy usage. And the last, to also control passive equipments of radio sites. Think about air conditioning or other passive components. If you control in real time, you know the behavior, and you can even then trigger per each radio site some actions. And then at the end, this can save up to 30% of energy saving in average for radio sites across for operators. So that's why I say stepwise, holistic approach addressing different pieces of the network, meanwhile evolving toward 5G.
Many thanks. One last one, as we also know that you will have to move on after this talk. What about jobs? I mean, think about this digital twins, things about this, well, we call them cobots. So in cobots means we're collaborating between robots and humans. So we still have humans in the equation. How do you see this if we apply this futuristic robotic and remote sensor view of the modern world? Will the jobs disappear? Will they be transformed into other jobs? How do you see that?
This is a so relevant question. This is very, very important. And of course, transformation, you know, in operation already happened, you know, with the industry revolution two centuries ago. Now the real difference is that now it's happening everything quicker. And at Ericsson, we take our responsibility. What we did is to develop a 5G human rights assessment. We wanted to understand the impact of 5G starting from our own operation. Again, we are a manufacturer. So we are looking at Ericsson, what is important to do to transition jobs, profile, you know, and needs into the next scenario, when 5G will be fully deployed with all the application as manufacturer. And then, of course, we are also looking at other industries as well. And we realized, and we have a report named the 5G Human Rights Assessment Report. It's available on our.com, and we'll put it in the chat, where in a very consistent and detailed way, we put responsibility on Ericsson, but also we identify the collaboration area with telecom operators, as well as other key players. As we understand, that's, let me say, an area to transition. So we need to, if we look at 1 decade from now, we see that there will be a huge need of new skills, digital skills. So it's important to manage the transition, to shift, prepare the next generation to that, and also to prepare, to reprofile the current workers. And we need to act now. That's what we are doing at Ericsson. We need to act now to be ready and to make it sustainable. So that's of course it's a big question, and we are managing based on our responsibility and our area of application, of course.
Great, many thanks, Rosella. So yeah, if you have a couple of minutes left, we would be very interested to see some pointers in the chat. And then maybe colleagues can also take it up and put it on the website of the Connected University to post it there if that's possible. Okay, but time is running, so it was super interesting already. And already many thanks, Rosella. I know that you will move on, and we wish you a nice day and many thanks. Okay, so next speaker is Azedine Gatti. He's a manager of R&D department in Orange Labs. He's engineer in telecommunication and signal processing. He received his PhD degrees from University of Paris, Pierre and Marie Curie in Paris 6, and in 2000. So since 2001, he has been at Orange Labs, France, where he has been involved in research in the fields of applied electromagnetic for telecommunication systems. Since 2011, he leads a research program dedicated to energy efficiency of wireless and fixed telecom system, and is currently responsible of a department dedicated to wireless networks in Orange Labs. He has been involved in European Celtic Plus, OperaNet 1 and 2, and So Green projects, and was appointed as vice chair of the wireless group in Green Touch initiative. He is currently involved in European project HexaX, that was just mentioned also by Rosella, project dedicated to 6G. Dr. Gatti is a member of the Union Radio Scientifique Internationale in France, member of IEEE, and a senior SEE member. So Azedine will indeed tell us a bit more about the networks themselves and on what I call the minus. So how can we make the minus smaller? So the bill, then he's the guy, or his company is actually those that have to be paying part of this 25 billion bill that Rosella presented in the first talk. So really looking forward to your talk, Azedine.
Thank you, Peter. We pay only $500,000 as an operator. I mean, we are just Orange. Will give you just our picture. Before I start, thank you very much, Peter, to give me this opportunity. And I want to tell Rosella before she left. I hope she don't let. I share my slides before she ends her talk, because I was asked by the organizer to share my slides. So I hope it does not. I mean, sharing my slide was not disturbing for her. So thank you, Rosella, and thank you for your speech. I really like it. So it's a good introduction for my presentation. My presentation is, as you said, Peter, is more focused on the technical point of view of network, and I will try to give you an operator point of view on 5G and on ICT in general. I think that if I can summarize my speech, I would say in one sentence, comparing 5G to the legacy networks is like, I mean, 5G is consuming more energy than the other networks, but it's more efficient. It's like comparing a bus to a car. It's exactly the same thing. A bus is consuming more energy than a car, but it is transporting more people. And that's why it's more energy efficient and more ecologic to take a car than to take a bus than to take a car. So this, I hope this image would clarify the things. So let me go to my slides. I tried to. Oh, I have a problem. Okay. So the first slide is just to say we spend a lot of time in Orange, I mean, studying, I mean, looking to the publication, scientific-based publication. And you see the presentation from Rosella. She said that ICT is responsible of something like 1.4% of all the GHG emission in the world. In other publications, you will find other numbers, 2%, 3%. I mean, and all those publications are not false. They are true. The problem is that the scope is not the same. All the publications, I want to focus the scientific-based publication, the difference between them in terms of number, because people agree on that ICT, the impact of ICT is something around or between 1.5 and 3.5%. of all the GHG emissions. But you have to take care about the scope and the contour of those studies. This is the main difference of all the studies that you have in that you can find that are published now. The other point that I want to emphasize is what is the definition of ICT, and this is very important if we want to access and if we want to assess the impact of ICT in general, including 5G and including all the legacy networks. You have to define what is the contour of ICT and what is the definition. And I put here, I mean, for the definition of the of ECD and ITU, which is basically including mobile and user equipment, data centers, and of course the fixed and wireless networks. And that's all. I mean, we can include all the digital world, and then the impact would be not the same, not the same as the ICT. The main difficulty in assessing the impact of ICT is to evaluate the indirect emissions, which means the rebound effect, which can be, I mean, we still, I mean, we have now publication on this. I mean, research in many universities, in OILU University, in Ghent University, in Belgium, in Germany, in France. We have a lot of publication from academia and from industry that are trying to assess this indirect impact. And I hope in the coming years we will have a clear evaluation of the indirect impact of ICT. And what is really very challenging and very difficult to assess is the changing in the behavior. You were Peter, you were speaking, you were talking with Rosella the last question about the skills. And yeah, there is not only the skills who are changing, but the behavior of people and the at the societal level is changing, and that is the main difficulty. Okay, I will go very quickly in this through this slide. Oh, sorry. Just to say, we succeed as operators. I mean, all operators, we succeed to maintain under control our GHG emissions and our energy footprint. This is due to the fact that in the previous decade we have introduced many levers for improving the energy efficiency. And you see here the graphic coming from the ITU. The blue curves show the impact, which is now stabilized. More or less, it is stabilized. And while at the same time, the traffic continues to grow exponentially. And this is due to mainly to energy efficiency in one hand, but not only. This is also due to the fact that the replacement of our devices is, let's say, we keep our devices more longer in our pocket. So this helps a lot the ICT sector, and I will show you why this helps. So if I go to the next slide. So here I give you just a picture, a global picture, which is now published in the ITU, which is the main standard, I would say, worldwide standard that gives you the impact of ICT. And you see here that we have user equipments, we have networks and data centers. And you have the two phases of operations and embodied emissions, which are more or less what we spend as energy and GHG emission and water consumption, all the environment impact during the phase of manufacturing. We have to take into account all the life cycle of products, the manufacturing, the usage, and then the end of life. And that's why we have to capture all the picture of the impact of ICT. And here you have a very nice picture that show what is really impacting in our sector, in the ICT. Remember that the ICT is only responsible of between 1.5 and 3% of all the GHG emissions around the world. Inside the ICT, we have networks, devices, and data centers, and this is the let's say the different segment consumption. Also, a very crucial point in the devices. There is not only the smartphones. Here you have in the same document from the ITU, you have the spread of what is the user devices. So the user devices basically, or mainly, you have the CPE, which are the user equipment inside the houses, servers, and the PCs, the laptops, or the computers, which are the main contributor to this impact. The smartphone is really a small piece of that. Just to emphasize, I mean, just to give some clear picture of the impact. Okay. Now I move to Orange. What we are doing in Orange. So of course we are contributing as all the operators, I would say. Yeah. Well, our first is I give you just one slide to give you the picture of our engagement, our commitment. So we have basically one commitment, which is net zero carbon in 2040, which means zero carbon emission in 2040, 10 years before the GSMA. Yeah? You know that the GSMA have committed to, all the operators have committed to net zero in 2050. We tried to do it 10 years before, and we have 3 engagement: environment engagement, circular economy, and digital inclusion. I will not go into the details in each one of them. I just want to highlight something on the environment challenge. So in Orange, we have a challenge about controlling the energy consumption, of course, because of the bill. The second one is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 30% compared to 2015, and to renew our energy mix by 50% will be on renewable. I mean, 50% in 2025. So sorry, in 2025 we want to achieve these 3 KPIs, hoping that in 2040 we will reach the net zero carbon, completely zero carbon in 2040. Okay, these are our KPIs, and the first thing that we have done is to compare ourselves with the other operators and the other actors. Yeah, I have to. If we compare all the footprint of Orange Group in all the countries, we are present in 35 countries. Orange represents only 0.8% of France, only compared to France GHG emissions. And operators as Orange, which is present in all over the world, our impact is 0.8, including manufacturing, usage, and end of life. And then we have taken the Newsweek paper, which every year gives a ranking of all the industry, and we compare the energy consumption evolution between 2060 and 2080 of all the operators. Here you have many operators. Sorry, I anonymize the operators. So here you have an operator from Germany, UK, Norway, from I don't know, from Italy. You have and here you have Orange. Sorry, I have to remove this. Sorry for that. So here you have Italy, Orange, China, and USA. This is not all China and all USA. It's one operator in China. And we have seen that they are more or less reducing their energy consumption due to the energy efficiency, due to the efficiency of the equipment. While at the same time, the GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, they are increasing their consumption because they are deploying more data centers. So we are in a positive, way in the operators because basically we spent more than 10 years cleaning and greening networks, and I think that is why we achieve now a kind of maximum of our consumption, and we are even decreasing it. Okay. I move to the next slide. I try to do it very quickly. Okay, let me move now to the 5G. So you know that the 5G is installed on top of the first, second, and 3 and 4G, and it is bringing new application and new services. But the problem is that 5G is installed on top of existing networks, and this will have an impact in terms of energy, of course. For us operator, we are paying the bill, so it's important for us to assess the energy. It has an impact in terms of a social and societal impact, of course, and it will have an economic, we hope so, it will have an economic impact. So I will give you just a picture about the 5G to concentrate on the 5G. So here you have a picture that we have done in Orange comparing 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. All these are coming from measurement, real measurement in the network. We capture every day the consumption because now we have probes that are installed in the network, and we can capture every day the consumption of our network. If you compare in terms of kilowatt hour, which is the energy consumption per bit, per gigabyte, this is very important. It's kilowatt hour per bit. You see that 2G 3G is 10 times better than 2G, and 4G is 10 times better than 3G. 5G concerning only measurement in lab, because when we have done this evaluation, you have done it in lab we have not yet deployed 5G at that time. We did not, so we compare with lab measurements, and our first lab measurement showed that it is 2 times better than the 4G. 4G at 30% load, as we say in French, en rythme de croisière. It's the normal rhythm of deployment of the network. 5G is just the early deployment, and it is 2 times better than the 4G, and we expect that in the future it will be 10 times better than the 4G in terms of kilowatt hour per gigabyte. Then people, when I explain this, when I give the energy efficiency, they tell me, yes, you're right, Asdin. Yes, I agree with you. It's better. It is more energy efficient. But people continue to, the traffic continue to increase. Is it better to deploy the 5G? Because it is more consuming than the 4G in terms of absolute value, not the relative value. And here we have a study that we have done. Basically, my boss asked me, do we have to deploy the 5G until now, or do we have to delay it and continue the 4G? And you see all the scenario here that no matter about the scenario that you have, continuing to deploy the 4G is not sustainable. Because if you continue to deploy the 4G to take into account the increase of the traffic, it will be horrible in terms of energy consumption and GHG emissions. The best scenario is this one. If you can see my mouse, the best scenario is to continue to start deploying the 5G. Of course, the 5G is deployed at the same time as the 4G. We will not stop deploying the 4G. We will continue to deploy the 4G, but the 5G will be the next generation of network. I hope it's very clear. So it's not sustainable to continue with the 4G, no matter is the scenario. 5G is now, it's better to continue with the 5G. Sorry, Peter, if I'm late, tell me. Yeah? Okay, so this is just an explanation why a factor of 10 between the 5G and the 4G. Basically, at launch, as we said, it is 2 times. This is lab measurements. We can confirm that by lab measurements. So remember that energy efficiency is the kilowatt hour per gigabyte, not kilowatt hour only, not the absolute value, per gigabyte, okay? So the first is a factor of 2 due to, this is the initial point. The traffic load, when the traffic is increasing, of course, we will benefit from the spectral efficiency of the 5G compared to the 4G, and we estimate this at a factor of 2 in 2025. It will, the traffic load, we estimate it at the rhythm, the normal rhythm, it will be 30% load. Huh? Of course, we will continue to benefit from the Moore's law, which is basically the improvement of electronics. We estimate at 10% in the next 5 years. Huh? This is coming from our collaboration with our providers, electronic providers like NXP and other electronic providers. Of course, I think Rosella speaks about very quickly about sleep modes. Sleep modes in 5G are really a new improvement compared. I mean, we have sleep modes in 4G and 3G, but in 5G it is in the DNA of the 5G, the sleep modes, because basically a base station which has nothing to transmit, she will be in a sleep mode, and the sleep modes in 5G are really very, very efficient in the 5G compared to the 4G. I will not go to the details. If you have question, I can go back to this. Of course, PA efficiency. This is due to also to the material for the power amplifier architecture, and we estimated this to 20% in the 5 coming years. And of course, the antenna design and integration. This will help also for the improvement for the next 5 years. And of course, one lever, which is the network sharing, this depends on the operator strategy. Yeah? Network sharing is not something that is mandatory. We will, I mean, in some cases, we will share the network, and it will, of course, improve the energy efficiency. So all these parameters will help for improving energy efficiency of the 5G compared to the 4G. As I said, X2 at the beginning and X10 in 5 years, and then I finish, I think.
Azadin, one clarifying question on this one. Can you go back once to this graph?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
When you say traffic load, what do you mean? It's normally it goes in the other direction, no? It consumes more. Why is it an improvement factor, the traffic load?
Yeah, because remember that it is kilowatt hour per gigabyte. So as the gigabytes increase, the kilowatt hour per gigabyte will increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, and I said that at the beginning we take only 5%. I go back to my slide. Sorry. I said here the X2 we consider 5G initial is 5% load, very low load.
Okay.
And then here we consider the normal behavior at 30%. Here as 50%. I don't know if we will reach the 50% load, but the 30%, yes, of course, we will reach it. I mean, if you consider the entire country, you can have some base stations which are more loaded than others, but the average load would be
okay. So it's the efficiency gain in terms of traffic.
Yeah.
Azadin, can you take 2 minutes to close?
Yeah. Just 1 more minute on the 5G and 6G, because you say, as you said, Peter, in your discussion with Rosella, we are working on the 6G, and now this is our point of view as an operator. We see, of course, we have reached a kind of an optimum in terms of performance. 6G will continue the work on performance, on capacity, data rates, latency, reliability, and all those things. I mean, we will continue our business as usual in 6G. What is new in EXA-X, which is the flagship of the European Commission on the 6G, is that we are now tackling the problem of societal requirement. And societal requirement is not only in terms of energy efficiency, as I said, but also of low end-to-end environmental impact, security, resilience, digital inclusion, and EMF aware. EMF is the exposure to radio waves. All those, I can speak 1 hour on this slide, but I mean, just to say that 6G will take into account both the performance and also the societal requirement in terms of sustainability, security, resilience, and other things. And we hope we will give the building blocks in the EXA-X project, and we will succeed in doing this in the coming 2 or 3 years. And I end my presentation here. If you have any question, I will be very glad and very, very, very happy to answer you.
Many thanks, Azadin. So very interesting points that you made, also responding to some of the discussions we have with stakeholders, members of parliament, and so on. Yeah. Especially this 4G sustainability is interesting, that we say traffic will continue to grow even if you don't deploy 5G, and the result we have seen on the slide. Yeah. So maybe some questions from the chat that we can take now. There was one question on, well, 2 questions on maybe some efficiency factors that we could think of. One is the potential of data transmission technologies beyond radio. So when we think about light, sound, quantum, this is already factored in your expectations, I guess, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more how you see the radio evolving and how that could maybe also give us some energy efficiency gains.
Yeah, very, very, very challenging question. Yeah.
Very quickly.
This is really exactly what we are doing in EXA-X. We are exploring, because basically it will depend on the frequency carriers and the frequency bands that we will choose for the 6G. As much as we are increasing the frequency band that we will use, we will enter in a domain that is a cross domain between optics, radio propagation, and the quantum. So I don't know. I mean, very quickly, I don't know how to respond to this question, but it will depend on the frequency band that we will choose. And yeah, there will be a mix of all of this. I mean, the radio, there will be a mix between radio, optics, and even quantum communication. I do believe.
Yeah.
This is my
answers yes, very good. And then there was one other question on decentralization. So
Yeah.
we know it from the cloud world that you have data storage can be decentralized. Of course, we see also same tendencies in networks. Think about 5G edge computing and virtualization, cloudification of networks. But do you want to add something on how we can have a decentralized energy usage or production for 5G? Is this factored into your thinking?
Yeah, because you speak about two things. Decentralization of data centers and decentralization of energy powering. Let me give two responses. Decentralization of data centers. It's not a good question, sorry, because we will have both. We will have central cloud and edge cloud. We will have both solutions. We cannot choose between the edge cloud and the central cloud. The real question is how to use and how to manage data centers in a green way when you combine the edge cloud and the central cloud. I see a lot of publications of KTH, KTH that have done a lot of job on this. I advise you to go to see their publication. Basically, there is a compromise. There is a balance when you put the network functions. Is it in the central cloud or in the edge cloud? Very quickly, sorry. On the energy decentralization, this is a very nice point. Yeah, because we are moving to something that is decentralized in terms of energy. Yeah. Because of smart grid, because of I mean, we have to renew our to modernize our way of consuming energy. We cannot continue only with the what we call with the legacy providers. We will now rely on what we call in our language PPA. This is the power purchase agreements that we will introduce more renewable energy, and it is easier to have both the small farms, small energy farms, and the big energy farms, solar panels farms. For example, in Orange, we are building a lot of farms with solar panels, and it is really, I mean, the ROI is less than 2 years, so it's very, very nice for us. I mean, economically and also for the planet. So yeah, the diversification of the sources of energy is really very important for us. Yeah, for all operators, I think, in all over the world. Sorry.
Thanks. Then we have a couple of questions. Maybe we can take them later because they are more on the greening of the sectors, not so much on the networks themselves.
Yeah.
But one interesting one is here. I mean, coming back to this really interesting one on, say, do we continue 4G, 5G? And you said rightly, we continue to use 4G because you will do things as they are most efficient and also most energy efficient, but and also in terms of how best to serve your customers. And 5G is, of course, something that comes on top in that sense that you use it where it's to increase the efficiency. But then people are worried to say, okay, then we have all the energy consumption of the 4G network. And then we put the 5G network on top, and this will consume even more energy or additional energy. What would be your answer to that?
Yes, that's clear. If we install the 5G on top of the 4G, we will increase our consumption. But please take into account that we don't have only 4G and 5G as a network. We have a lot of networks, and we are, for example, we have a collaboration with Dutch Telecom. With Dutch Telecom, we succeed to introduce the 5G without increasing the total energy consumption. How we could do that? By decommissioning the legacy networks. Decommissioning, for example, 2G, decommissioning 3G, decommissioning the ADSL, decommissioning the Oh, like le cuivre. The RTC,
Copper.
we call, yeah.
Copper
The
switch off.
Cooper. Thank you very much, Peter. With decommissioning the Cooper, Dutch Telecom, they succeed to completely, avoid the increase of the increase in consumption of the 5G by decommissioning the Cooper. I mean, we can have in our portfolio in Orange, we have more than 50 levers to increase the energy efficiency of the network. It is very wide. I mean, the levels you can play with the climatic range inside data centers. You can play with the renewal. You can play with the decommissioning. You can play with lighting. We can play with data centers. How do you optimize the data centers? We have a lot of so you have to think more widely and not only on 4G and 5. If you consider only the perimeter of 4G plus 5G, of course it will increase. Yes.
Yeah, but we can't switch off the 4G now because 5G is not a technology that we can cover everything today. Maybe this will come, as you say. Nowadays we think about switching off 3G. This will come quite soon.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we will see, of course, how things evolve. And at one point we might switch off 4G, but today we need both. Okay.
Yeah.
Many thanks, Azedine. So you will stay for the discussion for the panel later.
Okay.
And now I'm happy to move to Marit. Marit Paloverta is Director Regulatory Affairs at ETNO. She has an extensive expertise in telecoms, broadband, and internet matters. She joined ETNO from the Internet Society, where she served as a senior manager Europe, and where she has acquired strong experience of broadband policies, as well as extensive links with internet and tech stakeholders. Marit also had direct experience of the telecoms business during her 6 years at Cisco Systems, and has developed a strong service-oriented hands-on profile acquired in leading consultancies, Interrel and Schumann Associates. She also has a strong European academic background from the College of Europe, LSE, King's College, and Sciences Po. Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here, Marit. I always enjoy the panels that we have. We didn't have the opportunity to have real meetings in the last years and months, but really happy to have you today virtually here. Your talk will be greening the digital value chain and what is the role of 5G. So really looking forward to the talk.
Right. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. And thank you also to Azedine for the very passionate presentations. It's good to hear about the real technical stuff from time to time. So perhaps I'll first say a few words about ETNO. I know that we have a large audience today, and that we will not necessarily, that not everybody necessarily knows us. So ETNO is a European-wide trade association, and we represent the largest operators in Europe. And at the moment, I think we have about 33 members, and you have our members here on this slide. And you also see that Orange, namely, is a member of ETNO. We also have observer members, which typically tend to be the vendors, and also then some international operators. And again, we have our other speaker, Ericsson, also present here. So I'm truly hoping that our messages will be much aligned. And of course, already a lot of things were being said. So I'll try to complement from the kind of telecom sector. And just so all in all, the ETNO members, the full members, the operators, account for about 70% of all investment footprint in Europe. So this is investments in both fixed and mobile networks. So we are speaking with I guess, a kind of a white noise representing the European telco sector. And then, so today I'd like to kind of give you an idea on where we are. And first I'll say a few words about the markets, and already, quite a lot of things were being said, but just to put things into a context from a European perspective. And then we often at ETNO, we talk about first the greening by networks, meaning that networks, of course, are a major enabler for sustainability and greening of other sectors than the ICT sector. So that's one aspect, very important from our point of view, to have the right balance when we start talking about policies, etc. And then I'll talk about the greening of the networks themselves. And as I already gave a lot of data, but I'll also try to reflect a bit more on the European data and where we are in that respect. And finally, so at ETNO, we are based in Brussels, and we work very closely with Peter and the other policymakers on the policy issues in this regard. So I'll also touch a bit on the role of policy, because there's a lot of things going on in this space at the moment. So we need to also find the right balance in that regard. So let's go. First about the markets. So the situation in Europe in terms of coverage, these are some numbers that are from an ETNO report carried out by Analysis Mason, and we published this earlier this year. And what you see here is the availability of, first of all, LTE, so 4G networks, which is in Europe already nearly at 100%, and then also of 5G networks. So the orange bar that you see here is the number from Q3, so autumn last year, and that's at nearly 25%. And a few points I wanted to point out based on these numbers, just to put things into context, is that of course the 5G deployment and coverage is not yet very advanced. It's advancing very quickly, as Azadin was also saying. But this is where we were still last year. So, and if you think about also then the numbers of actually uptake of 5G services, so in the same report, Analysis Mason, they estimate that in 2021, only about 7% of European consumers and users will have taken up 5G connectivity services. So when we put this into a context, of course, we have to point out that the analysis of sustainability is still very much based on ongoing work, and in part it's very much based on also theoretical data and analysis of data that comes from different lab tests and also from different site trials from our members' perspective. The second point is that it will take, of course, then many years before 5G will be the prevalent network. And I think Peter and Azadin just discussed this. So we have in parallel the 4G network here. So we need to also, when we assess the impact on sustainability. And so what does 5G mean to you? Here, I think the key point is that there will be a lot of new services, new types of devices, new types of innovative things that will appear based on 5G and based on the capacities, the technical capacities of 5G. And we really need to then look at the whole equation when we start talking about sustainability. And where, of course, we as the operators step in, it's more on the supply side. So we know, as Azadin was explaining very well, what's going on with the networks. And that's where we as operators will have the impact also on sustainability. But there's the other side, which is more the demand side. So, you know, what type of services will 5G enable, and what does this mean in terms of new devices, maybe IoT devices, new use cases, etc. So that also will have an impact, of course, on sustainability. And this is also a bit more the unknown for the moment still, as 5G is only ramping up. Also, the more the unknown in terms of the impact on sustainability. And also, of course, then the part that is a bit more out of control from the operator's point of view, because we are focusing on delivering the 5G networks and the services to users. From our perspective, however, these are some of the use cases. It's just a reflection of use cases that we are seeing. And this is data from a recent ETNO Boston Consulting Group study. And you have the reference at the bottom of the slide. So what we are really seeing, and it was already mentioned by many, so there will be different types of uses, and these uses, of course, will also then spread across different sectors, different industry verticals, whether it's healthcare, transport, smart cities, etc. So this is as well something to keep in mind, especially when we talk about the impact of 5G and or impact of network as an enabler for other industries. Then moving on to this enabling factor. So as I already said, so we actually think that it's very important to take this as a starting point. to point out that networks and digitalization at large are actually an enabler for more sustainable societies and economies as a whole. And I think that it is not only us as telcos who have an interest, of course, in pointing this out, but there's also been a wide understanding, common understanding, I think, by decision makers and policymakers on this. And this was already recognized in the Sustainable Development Goals. And also we are happily noting that the European Commission, of course, is recognizing this aspect. And then if you think about the impact, and here we are trying to quantify the impact on 5G on sustainability. So I'd like to share some of the numbers here again from the recent report with Boston Consulting Group. And so Boston Consulting Group expect that digitalization, not only networks, but digitalization at large will boost sustainability. And they estimate that there will be up to 15% reduction of global CO2 emissions from full digitization. And you can see some of the key enablers here. And here we go back to the different industry and vertical use cases. So for example, smart cities, they are estimating 30% emission savings in the context of smart cities. Similarly, 30% emission reduction for transportation sector, or 11% emission avoidance for industrial IoT, so different industrial applications, and 7% avoided emissions for the energy sector. So I think that these are very strong numbers that in many ways speak for themselves. Of course, they are still very much estimations, but I think that gives us also the confidence then to continue pursuing 5G in our societies and economies. And then also to point out, of course, and I think the previous speakers were also referring to this. So when we talk about 5G, we also need to take into account the digital value chain. So it's not only about networks, it's not only about 5G, as we said, so there are other parallel mobile networks, but it's also about the other layers. So whether it's the application interfaces or the different data apps that we are using, they will all, of course, have an impact on sustainability through data centers, storage, etc., etc. So we need to really think about this holistically, especially when we start thinking about policies and putting numbers against our ambitions and goals. So let's then move to the greening of networks. So what we as operators are trying to do in this space and are very much advancing with. So first of all, to say that ETNO, so we actually have a working group, internal working group with our members on sustainable developments. And you might think that this is something new, but in fact, it's something that has been in existence for more than 10 years already. And it's actually quite, well, let's say reassuring that we already have in the ETNO context some data dating back to 2012 based on, measuring energy consumption and different metrics in this regard. So it is something, it's a kind of a trendy hype topic for the moment, but from the telco sector perspective, this is something, of course, that has been already measured and looked at for a decade and more. And I try to here a bit reflect on the different aspects that we tend to look at when we talk about energy savings in the ETNO context. And you have at the moment, and it's not easy actually to classify these things, but you have the energy consumption, which I think is the most common way to measure our footprint in terms of networks. But then you have the greenhouse emissions, which is more of a holistic concept, which sometimes pops up in different contexts and studies. And then also e-waste, which I think came up in the chat with some of the questions. So these are all different angles that our members are certainly looking at. But it's not obvious always to put, of course, the numbers against these specific things. So let's talk a bit about the energy consumption. It was already mentioned that energy consumption, so it can be measured as total consumption or then consumption per traffic unit. And if you think about the technical parameters, and I'm not a technologist at all, but when we discuss with our members, it is not easy to actually come to these numbers. So the different technical parameters include things like the type of equipment. So it depends on the vendors, for example. the performance of the equipment, type of network configuration, so your network architecture, frequency, so which spectrum frequency are you using, bandwidth, also whether your equipment is indoors or outdoors. And also then you have the very important non-technical parameters. You know, I think very fundamental is the traffic profile and volume. So this is something that is largely out of control of operators. Peter was mentioning that, you know, he feels guilty when watching Netflix. It is something that is, you know, we cannot control. We are there to deliver the platform and the service, but this is something that users actually define. And this is then something that, of course, pushes up energy consumption. So it is an important lever. And also then climate, you might think that, you know, weather doesn't make a difference, but apparently it does also by way of sustainability. So moving on then to the numbers and trying to reflect on some of the numbers on the chat box out. So on the 5G specifically, so what seems to be clear from many studies that 5G deployment is likely to increase the total energy consumption, that already I think was clear from the previous speakers, but then to bring significant improvements in terms of consumption per traffic unit. So the relative efficiency in comparison to 4G seems to be much better, significantly better. And then based on, so we have different members, Orange just shared their experience, but we also then, of course, other members are doing different trials. And I'd just like to share some data from a trial that Telefonica has done in some sites. And so based on them, 5G technology could be up to 90% more efficient than 4G in terms of consumption per unit, so the relative consumption. And of course, then if we bear in mind the previous slide and the different technical parameters, so there can be a wide range of you know, differences between the percentages depending on the technical and non-technical parameters, but this seems to be the full potential or the maximum benefit that we could be gaining based on 5G. And then also I recently study by Ericsson, so this was actually nothing to do with ETNO, it was commissioned by the Belgian regulator to try and assess the impact of 5G in the Belgian specific circumstances. And based on this study, they actually came up with the following numbers. So 5G could decrease total energy consumption in mobile networks by up to 37% compared to a kind of hypothetical scenario without 5G. So as we said, at the moment, we have the parallel networks. And if you would assume that we would simply continue serving the increasing data flows with the 4G infrastructure, they think that, you know, we are 37% better off rolling out 5G and doing it with the 5G simply because, as Adin was saying, otherwise we would continue driving with the bus rather than upgrading to the modern car version as a vehicle. So that's, I think, quite interesting. On the e-waste, this is something that we are increasingly looking at also at ETNO, but there seems to be quite a little evidence at the moment on it. And the Ericsson study also mentions that from their perspective, the impact is negligible, not to say not important, but let's say doesn't provide such a peak in terms of e-waste that it necessarily will make a big difference as opposed to the current e-waste resulting from networks. And then finally, a word on the greenhouse gas emissions. So our members at ETNO are also very much looking at the source of energy that they are using. And this is, of course, you know, there's the cost aspect. So, of course, operators have an interest in making sure that they're not paying more for energy than possible. So they try to make their systems as energy efficient as possible. But also then it's a very easy way to actually, well, not easy perhaps, but another clear way to try and contribute is to use more renewable energy sources as opposed to non-renewable. And of course, it depends a bit on availability, depends perhaps on countries, what is available in the markets. But the key here is to point out that there is a trend towards renewable energy sources. And also then the CO2 emissions all in all, and here on the slide you see some data from 2018 to 2019. seems to be going downwards. So those were just a few reflections on the networks. And so if we were to try and sum up, so from our perspective, we try and look at the supply side. So really the factors that we can influence in our networks. But then also we have to keep in mind the more unknown factors, if you like, the demand side, where we as operators do not have a direct impact, but of course that will then contribute towards the sustainability footprint of 5G. And I think that, you know, here you also see, for example, that the switch of legacy networks over time is an important factor that was already discussed, shift to clean energy, etc. So all of these things we are looking at as operators and ETNO members are looking at in order to try and optimize to maximize the energy considerations when deploying and operating new networks. So then a few words about policy. I will not go into detail, but I think it might be an interesting aspect to bring this in. So we have a couple of very, I think, exciting initiatives happening at the moment in Europe. And I wanted to shine a light on this European Green Digital Coalition. So this is a new multi-stakeholder coalition that the European Commission has initiated together with different ICT industry members. And we're also very proud at ETNO that I think it was 13 of our CEOs were amongst the founding members of this coalition, and will now be working together hand in hand with other tech industry reps and also then policymakers on the future policies in the green space, and also really looking at on how we can make a difference in the tech space. And the key here is that the commitment for all the members who signed up for this initiative is to establish science-based targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and to become climate neutral or net zero no later than 2040. So that's quite an ambitious task, but very important one. And we also would like to recognize the European Commission's work in this regard, because it's been they have been playing an extremely important role in facilitating, in bringing us all together in this effort. So then we have, if we think about the policies in the digital space for the moment, we see very clearly that we have policies in terms of digitization where we are aiming at increasing connectivity across the EU. And this goes for fixed infrastructures. So we're talking fibers and other very high capacity networks, but also then namely 5G. And what needs to be kept in mind that we need to make sure that these connectivities, these policies to promote connectivity do not then be in conflict, will not be in conflict with the green initiatives. And also that the green initiatives then will not actually slow down the deployment that on one hand we are trying to achieve. And I think especially in the current pandemic scenario, it's also important the inclusion factor has become much more prevalent. So we want to make sure that all Europeans will have access to good quality, high-speed internet. So we need to make sure that we then frame the sustainability issues in a way that incentivize the sector, the telco sector, but also other tech players to become greener, but do not slow down the deployment of 5G. And one concrete example is, for example, in the context of these more connectivity-related policies could be network sharing. So more and more we are seeing on a voluntary basis that operators are starting to share infrastructure and networks, because in this way we can also reduce the environmental footprints. And we of course hope that the policy frameworks would endorse such an approach. On the green side then we have a whole host of different policy initiatives. And these are really policies, of course, where we are driving towards a more environmentally conscious and aware environment on a kind of horizontal level. But of course, these policies will impact then ICT and also telecommunications. So here again, we would just like to point out that it's very important to have a careful assessment and to make sure that these incentivize, all sectors, but also the telecommunication sector in a balanced way, and do not then impose any barriers or factors that may slow down developments in terms of digitalization. And I'm thinking I'm closing, coming to the end. So just as a kind of top of mind from my side, ETNO and our members, we believe very much in the transition to 5G and fiber. And this is really ramping up now dramatically across the different markets. And there are indeed these two parallel policy objectives. One is digitalization and the other one is green transition. And we believe that these two are complementary and they should be considered together, both kind of bringing us to the next stage in the digital society and economy. And when then policies are discussed, so we need to keep in mind that networks and ICT is first and foremost a strong enabler for other sectors to digitize and to be more green. And also then that we as operators, of course, already have done a lot of work on this and have been very proactive in this regard, and even have a strong commercial incentives to put our efforts into being more green. So this is something that has been going on and we have fully taken note of, and voila. So we hope to continue work on this with all the stakeholders, and I'm happy to answer to any questions in the Q&A. Thank you. Peter, I cannot hear you. You seem to be on mute, or maybe I have a problem with my system.
Am I back?
Yes, you are back.
Good. So my headset was empty.
Not video, but your voice is back.
That's good. My headset was out of power, thinking about power consumption and energy efficiency. So now, yeah, good. So the question was also what about the 5G and traffic growth? Because the figures seem to assume, or maybe correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at scenarios of traffic growth, and then we calculate how efficient is 5G, and then we can reduce energy. But is 5G not also stimulating traffic growth? In other words, if we would be a bit slower, if we say we don't do 5G, then there would be less traffic. How would you see that that supply and demand equation?
Yes, well, that's an interesting question, because of course the people or the things that produce traffic, the people who produce traffic, it's us, and it's us who are consuming the services and the the things that actually make traffic, data traffic increase. So and on one hand, as I was trying to express, so we have these goals, of course, to digitize our societies and to have more digital services, more connectivity, and all digital services. It can be anything from public services to entertainment type of services. So in a way, of course, then we do have a kind of, on one hand, the digitization as a thing that makes traffic grow. And then the green agenda, where we have an interest in a way to let's say, limit the traffic, or perhaps try to limit the traffic, but they seem to be partially at least going against each other. So, and we of course take this, the traffic growth of traffic into account in the numbers that I have shown and that we produce. it is not also exact science, so nobody knows how much traffic we will have because simply we don't know what type of services will be there in a year or 2 or 3. But, you know, as I said, so it is a bit of a theoretical exercise for the moment. We can only guesstimate on what will be there. But then we also need to think about this, you know, balance between the two things, and where do we want as Europe, where do we want to end up, and what is the right way to go? And also, of course, there's the question mark of innovation. So, you know, tech innovation is happening all the time. So it is not also limited to 5G. We don't know how we will be able to channel the traffic and deliver the traffic in some years' time. So not very conclusive, but there you are.
No, indeed. And of course, what you said in terms of innovation and other technologies, because at the end, it's not only 5G that will make traffic grow. Huh? I mean, we see AI, the new world of AI. We think about virtual reality. So all these technologies at the end of the day will contribute to traffic growth. Of course, I wouldn't see them only negative. And that was the first presentation of Rosella as well. And you also had it. We also have to see the plus, and the plus is bigger than the minus. But of course, an interesting question to ask. What will happen if we don't do 5G? Yeah, I don't think that traffic growth will stop. And it will indeed, what Azedine showed in his slide was interesting to see. Then it's not sustainable. And yeah, this is, of course, it's traffic growth that is estimated there is probably not only dependent on 5G or not. Then there was one interesting question also, of course, Rosella now left. It was about the suppliers. But when we asked the question, are suppliers doing enough in terms of energy efficiency? Well, we know her answer, because well, she showed it in her slides a lot already. But maybe your view would be interesting also, Marit, how you see the suppliers. Are they doing their job in that regard?
Well, I think, I mean, by and large, and I don't have any, I don't have any details on all the suppliers. So we are actually, you know, lucky in this world to have more than a couple of suppliers. So first of all, it's very important to have a, you know, competitive market, supplier market for 5G, of course, for us to build networks that are solid and resilient and all these things, but also green. This is a clear criteria, you know, these days. So they play a key role as, you know, operators, and, you know, I can talk only on behalf of our members who are showing data. So often we see that, you know, tests are being done in terms of sustainability with equipment of different vendors, and sometimes the results may be different. It is not to say that equipment of one vendor is necessarily worse or, you know, not. It is also a question of the network configuration. There are many other things that enter into play. So, you know, it is not a, you know, easy question to answer. But my impression and our impression certainly is, and also based on the participation of the vendor community in our ethno activities in the sustainability area, is that they are very active. So in many ways, I think vendors are, you know, doing a big effort here to try and green the equipment and to make sure that we have a good choice in that regard. Of course, there will be then, you know, we have to think about the other impacts. So what is the impact of more sustainable equipment on price, for example, or I don't know, security or etc. So there are other things where we cannot really compromise. Sustainability is an extremely important factor, but you know, we cannot make networks less secure or extremely expensive, because simply then the equation of delivering good connectivity to users will not be realized. I don't know if Azedine, you want to add something from a more technical perspective?
Yeah, Azedine, what do you think, also from your experience since years working on that? Are they doing enough, or do you have to push them? How do you see that?
Both. Both. They are doing a lot of things, especially for the legacy network. But we have to understand that the 5G is still under production. I mean, the improvement's still there. I mean, we still have room for improvement for the 5G and, of course, for the 6G. Yes, all the operators are now committed, have now committed for green. So they naturally push our providers and European providers to to tackle this problem. And as said by Marie, we have to take into account all the network and not only a piece of the network. We have to take it entirely from the access, the core network, data centers, manufacturing and usage, not only usage. It's not only a matter of using the networks, but also a matter of where and when and how we manufacture those products. So it's really very important what was said before. It is we have to take into account all the picture and not only one piece of the picture.
Many thanks. Yeah, then there was another question also on, because you just talked about price, Marit, and the affordability at the end of the day, and the access to all. And this is, of course, a topic that is very important also in the context of the pandemic, where we have seen now that everyone participates more and more, and also think about homeschooling, telework, etc. How do you see that? And then the question is here a bit more concrete to say, what about the right for everyone and possibly for free? How do you see that?
Well, you know, this has been sometimes a difficult, challenging topic for operators to discuss, because of course the concept of ubiquitous or universal access, it puts a big responsibility on the shoulders of operators. And, for good 20 years now, operators in Europe are no longer public organizations, but in fact, it's the private sector. So in order to deploy networks anywhere in Europe, there needs to be a business case, because otherwise simply companies will go out of business and will have to fire all people. So that's not a scenario that we would like either. So there is always the kind of challenge with the business case in the rural areas, and I think we all know that, in remote areas where you don't have perhaps many people living, so the business case is not as strong as in urban areas or other kind of populated areas. And I think we have kind of taken a step forward in this discussion because of the pandemic. So first of all, very much from our side as well, from the operator sides, it is not acceptable that simply some people do not have access to the internet because they don't, they cannot then contribute, perhaps work from home or do homeschooling, etc. So that's a situation we need to solve. And I think this is where the public sector has stepped in, and also the European Union has stepped in. And we now have the recovery funds. We have a lot of public money actually being channeled into trying to cover the areas where the business case, the traditional business case, doesn't exist or is very weak. So I think that, here the cooperation between the governments and private sector is very key, that we can make it happen. And of course, then you have the questions about skills, does everybody have the skills? How do we make that happen? But I think they're both public sector and also private sector. Many operators are actually running skilling programs and making sure that, we not only have the people being able to use the internet, but it's also very important to have the demand for the services that, we are providing. So it is about supply and demand. And in order to have a solid business case, you need people actually who will want to buy the connectivity services and pay for them. So I think it's very important that people also get then comfortable with digital services in the long run. Thank you.
Thanks, Marit. Then, okay, there were some questions that are a bit out of scope of the topic today, but we can still take them. I mean, it's also on health effects, potential health effects. And one question said, or comment said, that there is a consensus that 5G and mobile technologies have an impact on health. I think here, of course, we have to be careful in terms of simplifying messages. Of course, it always depends on the level of exposure. I mean, if there would be very high signal strength and you will be next to the antenna, there might be, of course, health effects. So there are potential health effects. That's why we have very strict limits in place to where operators have to comply with, so that the exposure is 10 times lower than where potential health effects could start. So that's an important point. So in that, but this one, okay, it's my colleagues from DG Santé that are responsible for a council recommendation that sets that at European level. But then there's also the question of disinformation in that regard. So 5G disinformation, because of course, if you simplify the messages, or if you even sometimes see claims that are out of context or even incorrect or inaccurate, that's of course then people have only one source of information. They take this and get afraid of the technology. So what do we do? What the question was asked to the Commission, but we can also talk about it with ETNO, because you had an interesting study on that. But what we are doing, of course, is we take that serious and we try to communicate. For example, we also work with member states to see what can be done on the communication side, but also on the side of transparency, so that we know how that are you informed, that you can see that what is your level at your home, and that it's so much lower than where these effects could start. So that are some avenues, and we had one we have some websites and also some videos that we produced, especially during the pandemic, where we saw that there was really the effects of this disinformation were really dramatic, where workers were attacked and sites were destroyed. So yeah, we take that serious. We don't want to put it away, and we have to discuss it. And there are concerns of citizens, and yeah, it's important to really clarify. It's quite a technical topic, but we have to face it and inform. But maybe Marit, you also had this Ipsos study, right? And you also have some insights on how much of the population is affected by this kind of disinformation.
Yeah. Yes, so indeed, it's an important topic, and I think it's also a legitimate concern. So I think it's it's normal and okay that people are concerned, and these things should be discussed. As Peter was saying, so as operators, of course, we fully comply with the set standards, and I think they are set at many levels. So on a global level, by this ICNIRP organization under the World Health Organization. We have the European Commission recommendation, which endorses that approach, and then some governments have even stricter criteria. So operators, we always, as you were saying, Peter, we operate and deploy fully in a compliant manner with all the governmental criteria. Now, then what there's a lot of discussion about that, and you refer to the Ipsos study. So indeed, we did a survey with the help of a survey agency, Ipsos, on the sentiment of European citizens on 5G. And as part of this, there were many questions, but one was addressing the health issue. So in general, actually, what was very positive is that people were generally optimistic and positive about 5G. So only a very small minority had serious doubts about 5G. But then around the health question, and I cannot remember the numbers, to be quite honest, but what was interesting is that there was quite a large, let's say, bulk in the middle. If you think about 100%, a percentage of people who weren't quite sure about the health effects. So they didn't say that they were massively concerned or that they were, massively not concerned, but simply they weren't quite sure. And I think what we as ETNO have tried to do is to try and encourage, especially health authorities and scientists, to really gather more evidence on this and produce studies, independent studies, that we could use then to have these discussions with individuals. And I think that would then help maybe to reduce this number of people who are uncertain about the health effects. We as operators are not scientists or health professionals, so we cannot really contribute on that ourselves. Thanks.
Yeah, that's of course a very interesting point. The science, and of course the science base is huge, and there's work since 80 years and more on that, and this is evolving. So it's of course important that we always keep track, and then what is probably useful also to have some in this context to have something that sums up and gives a bit of an overview. Of course, it's a very complex and a detailed matter.
Peter?
And there was one question on the
Peter, can I add just
sure.
just one?
Please.
About the EMF, because it's a concern for us, of course, as an operator. We have just to say that the ICNIRP, which is ICNIRP is an organization of scientists under the OMS and the World Health Organization. They have revisited their limits. They have redone and revisited all the studies about the EMF issue, and they confirmed the same levels as previously. I mean, the same levels that we were applying since the 20 last years. So we have to clarify that 5G will be taken into account on top of all the existing networks. We will not take into account only 5G. We take into account 5G with 4G, with 3G, cumulating all the emissions. Wi-Fi, all the emissions have to be compliant with the limits. We have, of course, as it was said by Mari, so we have the World Health Organization that has stated a report on this, and that confirmed the limits, and we have to comply with the limits. There is no doubt about this. So the World Health Organization, the European Commission, and then we have now, I'm talking about today, we have more than 28 national health committees that have already given a report on the 5G, specific on the 5G. And today there is no a problem with the 5G, that we are under the limits, of course. If you respect the limit, there is no problem. So until today, exploring all the studies, the scientific studies on this domain, there is no problem using the actual frequencies. Of course, in some countries, we still have some questions about millimeter waves, 26 gig, and because these are new frequencies, and we change the way of we measure and so on and so on. So we are we deploy the 5G under the same limits as the previous ones, and we accumulate the 5G with the previous ones. Okay. So, and as I said in my presentation, there is something which is really new in the 5G. You have waves only when you want it. When you make a call, you have the waves. If you don't make a call, the beam will change. This is the principle of the massive MIMO. This is the new technology. 5G will give an exposure, if I said, on demand. And not you will not have an exposure all the time. You will have an exposure on. So this is a new thing that is introduced by the 5G. So to respond to one sentence,
it's a good addition. And there was one question, especially on the millimeter wave, indeed. And of course, the ubiquitous millimeter wave radiation. I think it's not the purpose of millimeter wave, because the transmission, the cell sites the cells will be small. And they will not be all over the country, at least in the first years. So there's no ubiquitous millimeter wave radiation. And because there was a question on the wildlife, so we will see millimeter wave deployed maybe in hotspots in cities, and not even in Europe, not expected in the next few years. And this massive deployment of millimeter wave we see maybe in Asia starting, but even there, not wide area.
It's very specific, Peter. It's really specific. I just wanted to because Marit was saying about there was a question about the 5G and the deployment of the 5G. There is something which is crucial in the 5G, which is the slicing. Slicing is basically we are deploying. Of course, we have a 5G to increase the data rates, but we will have some slices for dedicated usage. For example, if you want low latency, you have to deploy a certain way the 5G to decrease the latency in a slice, which is basically a local area where you will decrease this kind of latency. The 26 gig, our problem as an operator, I can share it with you, is the business case. We don't have yet the business case. Is it really, because we have many solutions to connect people. You have the fiber, you have the point-to-point access. Why the 5G? It's not obvious to have the 5G. So many operators are studying the use case. Is it better to deploy it in a very rural area, dense area, suburban? the use case is not clear for us. So yeah, we still at this stage we still studying the business case for deploying the 26 gig, and what is really the slice that is. For example, in France, we are testing it in a railway station because we want to give a service to the people who can, before they catch their train, they can upload the film in 2 seconds. So this is only a use case in a small area. It's not really a business case that can be deployed everywhere. That's why I wanted to emphasize to highlight this notion.
Yeah. So indeed, I mean, we're talking about millions of small cells. I mean, we see massive deployments in Asia. It's quite impressive, but in Europe, it will take a while, and especially this kind of frequency bands will not develop from today to tomorrow. So yeah, then maybe just we have 1 minute, and of course we take a couple of minutes more. But maybe take one question and also give you an opportunity to have a concluding remark. And the question is, what is the main challenge that you see in achieving climate goals using 5G? Maybe starting with Marit to have a final thought on that, and then.
Well, that's a tricky one. I'm not sure there's one specific metric or thing that we can point out, but I think the challenge is actually to try and understand the big picture and the value chain and the impact of the networks as an enabler versus networks in themselves in this equation. And then to try and come to a conclusion that, is actually realistic and also practical in terms of, future policies. So it's really trying to understand the big picture in this early phase as well. So we're not there yet. We don't yet have 5G. So with all the unknowns, it is quite a challenge.
Azadeen, some final thoughts?
For me, I want to emphasize one thing is we don't have in Europe enough renewable energy. Yeah, I know. We don't have enough renewable energy because of the conditions. I think that the challenge in the future will be how to obtain more renewable energy from different sources, exploring all the sources, wind, solar, water, I mean, all the sources. And if I can say, there is another challenge is to allow European countries to exchange their renewable energy between them. That will be really beautiful. So yeah, the challenge is the renewable energy. For my perspective, I think energy efficiency for all of hardware, we spent more than a decade doing that. So now it's very good. It's nice. The next decade will be for sure. I think from my perspective is how to reinforce and how to foster research on renewable energies.
Many thanks, Azadeen. Very interesting. So, colleagues, I will conclude now because we're close to lunch. And I think we saw very interesting insights. On the one hand, very good examples, concrete examples where we see opportunities to green our economic sectors. Think about the ports, think about the manufacturing and others. And then also the big picture, as Marit put it, to see a bit what overall can be achieved, what is the potential here. And then, of course, also on the sector side, on our homework, as I put it at the beginning, what can we do to also look at our footprint from the sector and to also reduce that, which will be a big challenge. And of course, using more efficient technologies and means that we have to design our networks, but then also to the carbon footprint and using the right energy and by that come to this zero carbon networks as early as possible. So really very nice to have you here. It was a very interesting discussion. I hope most of the questions were addressed. If there's anything open, don't hesitate to contact us, and we're always happy to give you information and come back to you. So with that, just pointing to the next session of this fantastic Connect University Digital for Our Planet, and the next one will be on Monday at 10 o'clock, and it will be on blockchain. So what can blockchain do to address climate change and climate action? With that, I wish you a very nice afternoon and nice weekend very soon, and really nice to have you, all the panelists and colleagues also attending from all over the world and from all different areas. Many thanks, colleagues.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.